This is Mindfulness with Richard. I'm Richard Clarke. Welcome. This series focuses on mindfulness meditation. Listen, reflect, and deeply meditate. Today, I'm going to talk about detachment. This is the second of the four means and six virtues. Detachment, or vairagya in Sanskrit, non-attachment, not desiring what is transient and impermanent, turning away from the impermanent towards what is permanent. It refers to the letting go of attachments of transient and impermanent things, and instead focusing on what is permanent and unchanging. This can include material possessions, relationships, and even our own thoughts and emotions. These all change. We have many attachments and desires among these changing things. These bring heartache and suffering as they ebb and flow. The goal of detachment is to break the cycle of desire and instead cultivate a sense of inner peace and contentment. This is not reaching out for more, but instead being happy with the present moment. In practice, this may involve mindfulness techniques like we've been practicing here, such as observing one's thoughts and emotions without getting caught up in them, and cultivating a sense of equanimity towards the things that we desire. One way to cultivate mindful detachment is to approach your meditation practice with a curious and non-judgmental attitude. When you notice that your mind is getting caught up in thoughts or emotions, simply observe without getting carried away by them. You can imagine that you are a witness to your thoughts and emotions rather than being fully identified with them. My teacher, Nomi, said that the key to detachment was the knowledge that the real source of happiness is within, not from the objects and activities of the world. When something or someone makes you happy, where is this experienced? Of course, the answer is within. The source of the happiness is not from the external thing or event, but it is within yourself. If you cultivate this, you'll discover a happiness that is just there, uncaused by any external thing. The understanding that the source of happiness is within oneself strengthens detachment. When we recognize that true happiness does not come from external sources such as possessions, relationships, or external validation, but rather from within ourselves, we can let go of attachment to these things and focus on cultivating inner peace and contentment. This understanding can also help us see the futility of clinging to transient and impermanent things. This clinging surely leads to a sense of dissatisfaction and unhappiness as things inevitably change. Instead, we can focus on developing inner qualities like compassion, mindfulness, and self-awareness, which lead to a sense of inner peace and contentment. This, in turn, strengthens our detachment and makes it easier to let go of attachments to things that may be causing suffering. It's important to note that this does not mean that we should disconnect from the world or ignore our aspirations and desires. Rather, it's about cultivating a sense of equanimity and inner peace to help us navigate the ups and downs of life with greater ease and fulfillment. There are several ways to actually practice detachment. The first is the regular mindfulness meditation that we do to observe your thoughts and emotions without getting caught up in them. This can help you see them for what they are, transient and impermanent. The next is reflection and journaling. Reflect on the impermanence of things and journal about your reflections. This can help you see the futility of clinging to them and cultivate a sense of detachment. I haven't talked much here about journaling as part of the spiritual practice. It's a thing that can be of real benefit, particularly when you're a stage where you're actively exploring yourself. So if this isn't something that you are not doing or haven't done much, then maybe it's worthwhile just starting and see where you go. When I journal, what I've learned to do is just start writing about something and kind of open up to what's inside, and you'd be surprised at what shows up on the page. So that's something you may want to explore yourself. Another way is by cultivating gratitude. Cultivating gratitude can help you focus on what you have rather than what you lack. This can help you let go of feelings of lack or longing and desire and cultivate a sense of contentment. I think this is important. You can actually practice non-attachment. To do this, practice action without being attached to the outcomes of the action, acting without paying attention to the results. This can help you let go of the need for control and cultivate a sense of equanimity. Another way is to practice self-inquiry. Through self-inquiry, investigating your own sense of identity, you can understand the nature of self and the impermanence of the ego I. This can help to see the impermanence of everything and the futility of clinging. Another is to do things like listen to spiritual teachings, like you're doing now, watching YouTube videos, and reading spiritual books. This can help you deepen your understanding of detachment and provide guidance about how to apply it in your daily life. An ancient Indian way of learning spiritual subjects is to first listen or read, then reflect, then deeply meditate. This takes your experience and moves it through the mental cognitive state into the experiential state. And that's where your learning is deep. It's important to remember that cultivating detachment is a gradual process, and it takes time and consistent effort to see significant progress. It's also important to remember that detachment doesn't mean a complete absence of emotions or desires. It's not about getting attached or identifying with them, which can reduce suffering. Excuse me, it's about not getting attached or identifying with them. Detachment brings greater self-awareness. By observing your thoughts and emotions with a non-judgmental attitude, you can gain greater insight into your own mind and develop a deeper understanding of your own thought patterns and tendencies. Detachment is freedom. It allows us to act in the moment, unburdened and free. It's a liberating state of mind that improves our relationships, reduces stress and anxiety, and enhances our overall happiness and well-being. By practicing detachment, we cultivate a sense of inner peace and contentment and a more fulfilling and meaningful life. So, how was your meditation last week, Barley? You're muted?
I'm certainly glad that we have Thursdays because I feel like I haven't been very regular about things.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll get back, I'm sure. I'm going to listen to this one again. I like this. Impermanence is an interesting word. And detachment.
Mm-hmm.
Although, yeah, that's good. I'm good.
Well, that's good. And, that's one of what you talked about is one of the reasons why we do this, to continue to provide this kind of ongoing thread in our lives where, we are encouraged to keep at it.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. Anyway, very good. How about you, Doug?
Well, I'm certainly grateful for these Thursday sessions also. My meditation, I keep hoping to go deeper, but I seem to get to a point and then it doesn't. I have like moments where it gets deeper, but then it doesn't last.
Mm-hmm.
So
The mind comes up and it goes away.
that's
I know for me,
that's
there was also a time in my practice where the meditation got deeper for a moment, and I said to myself, "Oh wow, the meditation is getting deep." And as soon as I thought that, it ended, of course.
Of course, yeah, that's exactly because that's you're thinking then.
Anyway, it's funny, but having moments, the moments get longer and more frequent. So having moments actually is precious, I think, Because for me, the moments are one of the things that provide encouragement to keep it up.
Well, that's true for me also, because by having those moments, I know that there is something deeper there.
Yes, yes. How about you, Richard?
It's it's steady, and there's no way of evaluating it. Sometimes I don't even know who's meditating,
Oh, that's great.
and then sometimes I think I'm meditating. So
Uh-huh.
back and forth. But sometimes I get these phone calls, all these spam phone calls, and one apparently just came in a little while ago, and now I can't see everybody.
Oh, no.
Oh,
It
no.
affects the Zoom.
Oh, no. Bad phone call.
Yeah, they're all so many spam phone calls, and
Uh-huh.
no matter how many people you block, they still keep coming.
Right.
Isn't there a registry or something that you can sign? There used to be when we were in the States. There used to be
So
something
do
you could
not
sign up
call
for.
this. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that because I repeatedly get these calls,
So annoying.
and it's particularly bothersome. And I have to practice detachment in Zoom right now.
That's right. Well, we can see you
Okay,
and we can hear you.
okay, good.
And it's wonderful to have meditation where there is no one doing it.
Mhm.
That's very good. Doug would like that.
Yeah.
We all would.
That's right. That's right. How about you, Carol?
Nothing to report. I missed a few days on my trip, and we got back in it when I got back, and here we are.
Okay. Okay. Then, in that case, let's meditate for us right now. Mindfulness is present moment awareness, paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally, fully receive whatever is experienced, then let it go. Relax. Look for joy in this moment. Let experiences and thoughts come. Let them be. Let them go. All right. And now we have a video. What is Buddhist Nonattachment by Doug's Dharma.
So many of us will have heard of Buddhist non-attachment. Non-attachment in Buddhism. What is it and how do we practice it? We'll discuss that coming right up. So I'm Doug Smith. I'm study director at the Secular Buddhist Association. That's secularbuddhism.org. If you're new to the channel and interested in living a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled life, consider subscribing to the channel. And one of the ways that we can live a wiser and a kinder and a less stress-filled life is to understand what non-attachment is, and understand how to practice it, understand what the goal is, understand why. And so this is what we're going to be delving into today. And basically our attachment to things is our emotional involvement with them. It's a particular kind of emotional involvement, though. It's not just any emotional involvement, it's a particular kind. In particular, it's our desire that certain things remain the way they are. So for example, when we're in a very pleasant place, let's say we're on vacation, we're out at the beach, we're lying in a lounge chair, we become attached to that. We don't want it to change. We enjoy it so much. Similarly, attachment has a negative side, which is also known as aversion within Buddhism. And that is, it seems a little bit contradictory to say this, but our aversion is a kind of attachment because what it is an attachment to what is not happening. So for example, if we have to go to the dentist, if we're sitting in the dentist chair, we're usually aversive to that. We have aversion to it. We don't want to be there. What we might say is that we're attached to not being in the dentist chair. So basically attachment has two faces. It's our desire that pleasant things remain the way they are, and our desire that unpleasant things change. And of course we know that all things change, and so no matter what pleasant thing we're undergoing, it's going to have an end. And this is why attachment always leads to pain in the longer term, to suffering in the longer term, a kind of a psychological suffering, because there's no pleasant thing that always remains with us. So if we typically become attached to pleasant things, which many of us do, I would say all of us do really to some extent, then what we're doing is guaranteeing that we're going to have suffering that really isn't necessary for us, because we're going to have things that are pleasant that end. And I think we all know this when we're on vacation and that last day rolls around and we're feeling kind of glum because we've got to go back to the normal life. There's another critically important part of attachment, though, which is it's the way that it relates to us, to who we are, to who we see ourselves as. In other words, attachment is, if you like, a linkage between parts of the world and what we see as ourself. So for example, we identify ourselves with things. We see things as who we are, whether it be a certain kind of a political persuasion, whether it be a certain kind of national persuasion, what country we are, what we're from, whether it be from what city we're from, our sports team that we identify with. And we can see how this identification, of course, has its pleasant aspects, that's why we do it, but it also leads us into longer-term suffering. A perfect example being our attachment to sports teams, which for most of us is a minor attachment, and so we see it as kind of fun, and we can disassociate ourselves from it pretty readily when the team loses. But for some of us, it really can be a problem sometimes, because teams just always do lose. Otherwise, there wouldn't be much to sports in general. But this is something that we have to be aware of, that nobody wins all the time. Even the best teams don't win all the time. And so identifying ourselves with a certain team or a certain way of being is really, in the longer term, going to bring suffering for ourselves. And of course, we identify ourselves, let's say, with a city. And cities have their ups and downs. I mean, we can think of the terrible troubles that, for instance, Detroit has had to go through recently. because of the loss of jobs from the auto industry. You know, the city will have a downturn for a time, then it will turn up. But then we have the issue of, let's say, gentrification, where a separate group of people or a new group of people, or people who have been there a longer time or under different circumstances, may feel put out because the city is turning in a different direction. It's becoming wealthier as opposed to becoming more impoverished. And so no matter how the change goes, people can be affected badly. And so insofar as we identify ourselves with those things, we're setting ourselves up for problems no matter how things end up changing. We also, of course, identify ourselves with families. And this has great positive impact on us, but it can also have negative impact. It can have a negative impact insofar as we may have disagreements with members of our family. We may have trouble with members of our family. Members of our family may treat us badly in certain respects or at certain times. So having that attachment be a sort of a normal part of life can be a problem. And for many of us, we must learn how to overcome it. And I think for all of us, it would serve us well to at least notice that it can be a problem, and so learn how to relatively minimize it in the whole scheme of things. And of course, the opposite of attachment is non-attachment. It's a state of mind where we aren't readily or so readily identifying ourselves with parts of the world. We aren't so readily seeing things as mine, as who I am, as, you know, importantly where I'm from or what family I belong to. Insofar as we can minimize those, we lead ourselves to a stage of non-attachment. And the stage of non-attachment is a kind of, let's say, equanimity. Equanimity would be the mental state that we're in when we're in that kind of state. We're equanimous. We're less prone to be pulled this way and that by the worldly winds of success and failure if we're not identifying ourselves so readily with success or in opposed to failure. Because we'll all see both success and failure in our lives. And of course, this isn't to say that we shouldn't be successful. This isn't to say that we shouldn't strive to become better or strive to do good things in our lives. It's rather to say that we should be concerned with not identifying ourselves so readily with outcomes, which are not guaranteed, but rather to enjoy the process, to find joy in the process. And, you know, if the correct outcome comes, if the great outcome comes, then that's great. If not, then we accept it with equanimity and move on. Now, just as non-attachment has an opposite, which is attachment, it also has what's called a near enemy. Near enemy, I believe this is a term that comes from a later form of Buddhism. I haven't actually researched it. It would be interesting to know where it comes from. If you do, put it down in the comments down below. I don't believe it comes from the early texts, but that doesn't matter. It's nevertheless an important concept to get our minds around. Non-attachment has a near enemy, which is to say, a state which sounds like non-attachment, but isn't. And many times Buddhists themselves, or people practicing the Buddhist system, may mistake one for the other. And also it does sometimes unfortunately happen that people who are not Buddhist or who are not very familiar with Buddhism may also mistake one for the other and think that Buddhists are saying one thing when they're not. And that is to say, now we'll get to the point here, the near enemy of non-attachment is indifference, is disinterest. We might think that being indifferent to the way things are or disinterested in the way things are, well, that's the right way to practice non-attachment. But here's the point, that's not. That would be a mistake. Disinterest or indifference means a kind of total emotional divorce from what's happening in the world, or whatever that particular case is, whatever the particular case that we're not interested in. And we all know that this happens from time to time, and all of us have things we're disinterested in. And that's not necessarily a problem, but that's not non-attachment. Because non-attachment is the kind of mental state that not only is compatible with kindness and compassion, but that really should go along with kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy and equanimity, of course, which those are the four the so-called Brahmaviharas, or divine states of mind, the sort of higher states of mind or higher emotional states that we're trying to cultivate. And so non-attachment should be a kind state of mind. It should be a state of kindness, where we're kind to the things, but we don't identify with them. We don't think of them as mine. We don't think of them as part of who I am, but nevertheless, we're kind to them. We're compassionate about them. Whereas looking at them with disinterest or non-interest, or just not, not getting ourselves involved in that stage, is really not looking on them so much with compassion as with complete blankness. It's not looking upon them with kindness. It's looking upon them just with disinterest, which is quite different. In certain ways, of course, it's close. That's why it's a near enemy. We say a near enemy of non-attachment. It's near in certain respects. That is to say, it also doesn't have the states of attachment, but it's an enemy, or it's a different state in being, I think, unskillful in many respects. It certainly is unskillful in many of the important ways that we can relate to the world. The great Buddhist practitioner Joseph Goldstein once described the state of non-attachment in his book One Dharma, where he looks to sort of unify Buddhist Dharma and all the different Buddhist schools within the context of a contemporary Western kind of practice. And he looks at non-attachment as being central to that. At one point in the book, he really does focus on it as critical to what Buddhist Dharma is. He says, the mind of non-grasping, which is another way of saying non-attachment, is the essential unifying experience of freedom. That is, it's the essential unifies all the different schools, all the different approaches, all the different practices of Buddhism in this experience of freedom. Because a non-attached mind, a mind of non-identification, of non-grasping, is a state that's free. It's free from that kind of attachment. Because an attached mind is, to that extent, unfree. And I've discussed this kind of feature in a previous video on Buddhist free will in Buddhism, which I'll link to up here on the screen if you're interested in seeing it. But the general point here is that we're looking for a skillful state of mind, a skillful state that is not attached to certain aspects of the world as identified with who I am, but that rather is free to act without these kinds of identifications, simply on the basis of kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy, which are the overarching emotional states that really lead to skillful behavior. So how we practice non-attachment is, of course, an enormous topic in itself. We might even say that when we're asking how to practice non-attachment, we're asking how to do Buddhist practice. So it's everything. It's all of the Eightfold Path. But just to cut it down a little bit for the purposes of this video, I would say one of the aspects that we can practice when practicing non-attachment is to become aware of the ways in which we are not the things around us. We're not actually identified with them. They aren't actually ours in any fundamental sense. Of course, they're ours in a conventional sense, but we don't actually have control over these parts of the world we consider ours. We don't even have control over ourselves perfectly. We don't have control over our states of mind. So even our states of mind, in a sense, aren't ours. They're things that arise and pass, just as states of the world arise and pass. And when we come to see that these things are not ours, that they're not who we are because they're continually changing, then we can relax around this notion of them being who we are, and then we become less emotionally involved when they change from ways that we would like to ways that we would not so much like. This is a deep and complex teaching, and so if you have questions and comments, please do put them down below, and we'll try to get to them, and maybe other of you who see questions and comments down there can try to answer, or I'll try to chime in and answer if I can see them and have something important and interesting to say. If you're interested also in further kinds of discussions around these things or topics that I can bring up from time to time, check out my Patreon page, which is linked to down below. Thanks so much to all of you for being here. Thanks so much for your kind comments and your great questions up until now. And I hope we'll see you on the next one of these videos. So Thanks again, and be well.
Excuse me, I need to get the video started again. I clicked too many buttons. Here we go. Now we're going to meditate again. And during this meditation, pay attention to where your breath starts to change at the start of the in breath and the start of the out breath. Just notice between each cycle, from up to down, the small pause. Notice the pause. All right. And now we'll close with our chant. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Shanti.
Om. Peace,
Peace.
peace, peace. All right. Questions, discussion?
That guy had a lot to say. He had a lot more to say than, say, Howard Zinn. But
Uh-huh.
I like this guy.
Uh-huh. I
And
think we'll have him again.
I liked him a lot. And one thing I liked was I couldn't take my eyes off of that stick sculpture he had in the background.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
You were attached, huh?
I was attached, yes.
But I kind of like being attached a little bit. I think you just have to mix it up. Attached.
Well, in that case, the definition would be if it went away, you would suffer if you were attached to it.
Oh, yes. And you're
Right.
not.
So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Nomi talked about preferences versus attachments. And if you have a preference for a green shirt, if it's in the closet, that might be what you grab. If you have an attachment to the green shirt, if it's not there, you suffer. And so preferences are fine. They're not binding. The problem is in where it affects you, where you suffer if you don't get what you want.
Like hoarders.
Uh-huh. Exactly. It's like emotional hoarding. Exactly.
too.
Well, all right. And thank you for joining me today in this mindfulness session. And for the YouTube watchers, if you feel that this is worthwhile, give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the series. And namaste. We'll see you next week. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
You want deeper meditation, more peace, more happiness. Subscribe now to continue to find ways to get more from your meditation.